Hi, my name is Simon Hedley, known to my clients and partners as a strategic alchemist and an ultimate connector. I'm a chartered accountant who brings together and bridges the worlds of business philosophy, finance, marketing, optimization, ontology, and so much more. Always focused on one thing, the simple idea that can make the difference to people and projects, so we can tip the scales in their favor and get them complete. Pause, Stop, Reset is all about the three little words that can make the difference. They have for me and my clients, and I hope they will for you too. During the show, you'll get to learn about my guests' real-life experiences and the insights and lessons they've learned as they've navigated the resets in their personal and business lives, which you'll be able to leverage yourself. So let's start the show. Hello, I'm Simon Hedley, and welcome to this episode of Pause, Stop, Reset. Today I'm joined by Laurie Wang. Laurie is an award-winning digital marketing consultant, speaker, and social media trainer. Laurie, welcome to Pause, Stop, Reset.
Thanks for having me, Simon. It's great to be here.
I'm really looking forward to it because I've sort of got to know you a bit over the last year or so online because of one of our interesting mutual connections, which we'll get to, I'm sure, in the podcast. But the more I've got to know you, the more I've gone, you're the really interesting one.
Oh, you're too kind.
I'm being polite.
I won't tell him.
I know he'll listen to the show. This is recorded. He knows, and there's always a strong woman behind strong men. That's my philosophy. There's no self-made man out there. We all come from a lady, and the women out there are really what drives the world more and more. And I think more than that, there's a lot of heart-centered wisdom in what you've got to share. So we'll get to the interesting bit because I think many people might not know who you are yet, even though you've been out there for quite some while. Who is Laurie and what are you focused on today?
Yeah, so I think my main focus now at the moment is really building up a portfolio of interesting founders, entrepreneurs, and also clients I can work with regards to their online branding, their digital marketing strategies, and also level up their business as a whole in terms of overall growth from using a combination of these. And so far, the privilege of working with The Guardian, masterclasses, training some of their amazing readers on digital marketing strategies and also creating a plan from scratch. I've had the privilege of working with Google, rolling out the digital training program across the UK, which is something that's really close to my heart because I saw the true impact that it had on people when someone completely, beginner to everything in this area, being able to leverage the knowledge that we shared in that course, either online or in person, and able to then expand their business across the UK that way. And the power behind leveraging this whole digital revolution that we're in right now. And also the privilege of working with other clients, let's say Microsoft, previously on helping their internal marketing teams to level up their digital marketing strategies so they can actually create more impact through their work as well. So it's been a really great, interesting few years since I launched the business full on. Before that, I was an in-house marketer. And I really enjoyed that because I think that gave me a lot of interesting insights and also client experiences that I wouldn't have had if I just purely started my business as soon as I came out of uni. So I think that gave me a really great foundation, and I've been very, very grateful for that.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's a space I know fairly well. In the old days, in internet years, I'm quite a dinosaur. I started in 2000, Laurie. So you'll appreciate, it's 2023 as we're recording this. A lot's changed.
Oh, don't worry. I still remember when Facebook was called thefacebook.com. So that dates me a little bit there.
We were there when it was Homestead. There was no Facebook. And it's fascinating watching these waves come and go. And I think we're at a really interesting time where we're going back to hopefully what we're doing on this show, being authentic and real in a way that isn't just regurgitating somebody else's cliched quotes. But that said, I'm not the expert today, and we'll see how we get on. It's fascinating where we have worlds where people like the superstars of Matthew McConaughey's in working with Tony Robbins now, reaching 3 million people on a workshop, but basically doing what they used to do the old days, but now celebrity powers coming into this world of information marketing and real world business, right? So it's a fun time.
Yeah, I saw that. And I actually been listening to his Calm Sleep story for some time now. So I thought it was about time that he started going to that space.
Yeah, and the challenge is, and this isn't about him particularly, but we're sort of jumping ahead. I knew this was going to happen. This is what's happening lately. One of the fascinating things is that just because you see it online, it doesn't mean it's the whole story. And just because it's there and they've got somebody with a hand round and being a high five doesn't mean they're friends, right? Part of the interesting space today, the web is still almost a wild, wild west. In theory, it's highly regulated, but it really isn't. And maybe we'll get to that later on if there's time. But, we've seen the recent crypto issues where all these influencers now are being sued because they just got paid. They pushed out some promo to the network and they had no idea what they're advertising. Now, the irony is it's sort of the internet should be bringing us together, but for many people it isn't. And anything you want to add on that before we go on?
Yeah, I think there's definitely the negative side of the internet versus the positive side. And I always been the kind of, I suppose, prolific about talking about the positive side with regards to how we can leverage what's in our fingertips, right? Currently, our smartphones, essentially, to really help ourselves in terms of building our careers, our brands, by leveraging these different channels. But obviously, there are, the negative aspect of being sucked into, let's say, social media, right? Where we talked about this earlier off the recording, where it can affect some people's mental health being, and it's all about how we manage it, really. So choosing what we want to surround ourselves with. So essentially choosing the right kind of, let's say, accounts that you want to follow to give you the kind of right mindset when you're looking at their content in your feed, versus being affected negatively by, let's say, some influencers that you may not agree with, that perhaps make you feel worse about yourself because they're only sharing the best version of themselves online. So things like that, just being very mindful about it. How do you leverage as a tool rather than being sucked into it?
And this is why people love Laurie. She knows her stuff. She's a strong, solid brain, and that's what you need out there in the world. So let's get into how Laurie became Laurie. So if we look back on your life up till now, what have been the biggest shifts and resets you've been through?
There's quite a few of those, actually. So going way, way back when I was first born, there's something that my parents didn't realize until about a year into my birth, where they realized that I have a kind of condition that they couldn't really put their head around. So it took me to see a doctor. And what they found out is that I have this rare version of venous malformation, which is basically a clump of blood vessels that kind of forms in the side of, it could be anywhere on your body, really, but it happened to be right on top of my airways. And that made things a little bit more precarious ever since that point. So they're taking me to all kinds of different clinics. And that's actually one of the reasons why we ended up in the US eventually, where they found a clinic in New York that were able to kind of essentially treat me on that. But meanwhile, while that was happening, I think my mom, being the kind of person that she is, has always really pushed the concept on me that I'm no different to anyone else. And if there's anything that you want to do, you can still do it. Obviously, just kind of being mindful of the condition you have. But besides that, you can be the same to any other kid out there. And I think that's always been something that I kind of grew up with. And that made me, I think, in a way, a lot stronger as a person. Just because of the fact that I knew that even though I was different, that I was still able to accomplish a lot of things I wanted to do. And having my parents being the big supporting voices behind me has been really great. And I would say fast forward a little bit more. One of the other things I think has really been affected me in a good and also negative way in terms of the shifts and resets have been the recent pandemic that we've gone through. And the reason for that is because Simon and I, we both gone through this, obviously thinking that it's going to be 2019, at the end of 2019, and we're excitedly expecting our future child. So I was pregnant at the time and really expecting to kind of give birth in 2020. My parents were about to come over from the US, and it was going to be a great affair, right? But obviously didn't realize that the pandemic was going to kind of come through during that year, and everything was shut down. So not only we had this baby that we're expecting during that year, but also Simon signed a book deal with Penguin Random House. And that really kind of brought two big things, like life-shifting events together. So he was writing this book under a very tight timeline. And we had this newborn basically kind of just appearing in our lives during that year with no help around us, just the two of us being locked in during that year. And I think that, in a way, has shifted me in both positively and negatively. I think, being very frank on the show here, I do believe that, our mental health took a bit of toll during that year, having been through those two major events and having to really kind of shift our identity from being who we were to being parents. And also now he's also writing that book. But the other side of it was also positive in the sense that it made us more resilient as, new parents and learning about everything on the go. And also being able to operate together as a team. And I think that's another thing that made us stronger during that year, not as individuals, but also together as a couple, in the sense that if we can get through this part, we can really kind of face anything in the future on any challenges that are coming at us. So I think these are the two big life events that I believe have really shifted and kind of reset me in terms of who I am and made me different, but also evolved over time.
I love it, Laurie. And just for those that may not know, this is Simon Alexander-Ong, who wrote a book called Energize. And he's one of our former guests and friends. And it's been quite interesting watching how Simon's taken off and then going, wait a minute, he's got this Jedi partner behind his web marketing. This explains everything. Not exactly everything, but no,
You're too kind.
Having been around the block a bit, it's like, that makes some sense. Okay, good. No, I'm teasing. But no, it's been great. And nobody expected the reset of the last few years. And, some of those challenging times do bring out this identity switch that we've been through. And one of the things I'm always curious about, right? I look at these three aspects of pausing, stopping, and resetting. Which of those is hardest for you? And why do you think that is?
I think a reset for me definitely was during that pandemic a few years. And the reason why I say this is because before that, I was this very much kind of go-getter driven, 24/7 working nonstop hustle type of, type A personality.
Just like Simon.
Exactly. And you can see how that could be sometimes catastrophic at times. But at the same time, I think having been through this whole experience, and I was actually forced to really take a step back in my business during that year, at least when Sienna was first born, because at the end of the day, both of us, we can't go full on at the same time. One of us had to really kind of take that step back and take care of her, while the other person, in this case, Simon, can write his book. And I didn't share this with anyone before, but I did also have a book deal that I was about to sign just before that. But because we thought in this case, only one of us should be doing this at one point, because otherwise it would just be way too crazy. And we decided to let Simon go ahead with that. So I put my book plans on pause for now, but it's going to be continuing. So fingers crossed, and I'll keep everyone posted on that one when it does come out. I'll let you know. But I think that in a way kind of made me more present and really educated me about kind of taking everything in for the moment rather than actually living into the future. And I think that's where I was before the pandemic, where I was constantly thinking about the next thing. And I was never able to really fully enjoy the present of what we were accomplishing at the moment. And I think being a parent has taught me so much about patience, compassion, and being present with my child, that it kind of brought that into my work life as well. So it also made me much more efficient. It made me realize how much more time I had before I had a kid. And nowadays, making decisions or doing kind of, let's say, presenter decks or preparing for upcoming talks, whatever it might be, I take much less time to work on those because I know that by the end of the day, when the nursery is closed, I literally just have until that nursery pickup time to do everything I actually need to do. And it made me a lot more selective with what I say yes to as well. So in terms of time management, that's been a big plus for me. And I think overall, it just made me much more enjoying the life that I'm in rather than the life that I want to be in the future.
No, I hear that. And I get that deeply. There's a bit of especially in our 20s, if you are in that sort of that corporate environments, that you are sort of, there's a work to get somewhere one day maybe, versus being really enjoying the moment the way you can. And especially when you have those forced resets, it gives you that time to switch back into that. And you may have already touched on it. I'm just curious if that is the most important lesson you wish you could have given your younger Laurie, or if there's anything else you wish you could have sent back in time to your younger 10-year-old self.
Oh, that's a great point, actually, Simon. I think one of the things I did share about this on my YouTube channel is lessons in my 20s. And one of the things that I think the younger Laurie really benefit from is learning about learning about the compound effect of consistency. And the reason why I say this is because it's something that I struggled with so much in my 20s, or even before that, where I'm a very massively impatient person. And a lot of times if I don't see immediate result from something, I tend to give up on it quite early on. And I think that's something that's prevented myself, that younger Laurie, of achieving some of the things that she could have achieved earlier on if she actually just stick with it. And I think finally when I realized the importance of this is when I started building my own business, where I realized it's not, going to happen overnight. And as much as social media and some of the online media or newspapers might make someone believe that, you see all these stories about overnight successes or this young 10-year-old building businesses. But what they don't talk about is all the hard graft and the years of work that's gone into it before that. And I think that's something that I decided to really embrace with once I started building my business. And actually realizing that the joy is not so much in the end result, the joy is in the process itself. Because in that process, you're becoming someone better. You're becoming someone different. You're learning new things. And at the end of it, doesn't matter in terms of monetary result that you actually achieved. If you look back to the person you started with, you'll be a vastly different person than that younger self that you were before.
Love it, love it, love it. Fully agree. And it's the one that's most confusing for me, actually. I was doing Tai Chi when I was 14, and they always say like 20 years minimum to be a teacher. When you're 14, you don't even think 10 years, right? And now 25 plus years on, you sort of realize things and gone, had I just kept doing this every day, the same with writing, the same with publishing or any skill, it's that consistency over time does compound. Even this podcast today, 25 years ago, I couldn't have spoken in public. Now I sort of do it somewhat workably on a good day. So a great reminder there. And I also love that thing about the joy is the process, not the end result. If you imagine that the end result of having your child be, 50 and moved out is the goal, you wouldn't enjoy being a mother, being a parent, being in that dynamic. So really vital lessons. And one I think definitely the modern world misses in a hyper Minecrafty YouTube watching, the young kids. It's a really fascinating thing. That time focus is such a different thing. And great reminder there. Thank you.
I love that, Simon. Well said.
Hey, very kind. You see, we're trying there. We're trying to get better. So one of the things I love on my little journey and what's helped me when I've been going through pausing, stopping, resetting is watching books. Let's try it again. Reading books and watching movies. That's the one. Yeah. So I'm just curious, are there any books or movies that have been resources for you on your journey and helped you pause, stop, reset, and how have they done that?
Yeah, this might seem like a really interesting one, but I really like that movie Sliding Doors. I'm not sure if you remember that one from back in the early 90s, I would say. The reason for that is because I was reading this other book called Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I'm not sure anyone you guys who's listening has also read it, but it's a great book in terms of if you want to like a very light-hearted fiction, but also has elements of personal development weaved into it. And what it talks about really, it's very similar in both aspects, is that we all have different combinations of ourselves. And I actually believe in this, even though it sounds a bit woohoo, but I believe in the sense that, there are different universes out there of different versions of ourselves who are choosing different paths that maybe at different point in life that we had choices on. And I believe that the one that we're living in right now, obviously in this universe, in this version, this is the best life that we can be living in, at least in this combination of ourselves. But at the same time, it always made me, wonder and also think about all the other different versions of ourselves that we could be. But at the same time, I think it also made me much more grateful in the sense that there may or may not be this universe or other universes out there, but it also made me very grateful in the sense that I am in this current life right now. It made me a lot more present in the sense that, this is a life that I built. Doesn't matter what choices I made along the way, but ultimately I ended up in this point in life. And I think that also makes you just kind of really appreciate all the little things in your life that's happened along the way. And when you look back into your journey so far, you realize that all the little points in time connects together into this path eventually. And it's a bit kind of tying into that quote that Steve Jobs said in his graduation speech with Stanford, is that, you may never know in terms of the choice that you make in the beginning of the journey, but when you look back, all the dots will align. And I think that's a really beautiful way of putting it, in the sense that just trust in the process. And in this case, knowing that everything that you're doing has a meaning to it. You just might not know what it is yet, but when you get to that finish line or wherever that finish line might be in the future, and you look back to the path that you have come and you realize how far you actually made along that journey.
I really, really love those, and not come across that. The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, really interesting and such a timely one, right? Often when people are listening to the show, they might be having some challenging times, and you make those regret moments going, if only I hadn't done this, and this. And at the same time, when things are going well, it's easy to go, oh, yes, it was all because of me. So that reminder of these sort of infinite universes, and there's a great quote you might have come across. You don't know the end of the movie until the last scene. You come across that one? It's like things can be really challenging, but then turn around in a moment. And it's not to that last thing that suddenly things make more sense sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that, Simon. And also, I just want to add on to the point that what you said earlier is a lot of times there are different things in our life that we maybe thought that we want to try or do. And I always say, if there's a gut feeling in you that makes you want to do it or go for it, then try it. Because I always say that I'd rather look back and say, I'm glad I did, rather than I wish I had.
Very wise. And offline, we can talk about some interesting things about that one, but I'll keep that for the advanced lessons, the advanced explorations, because it's a really fascinating bit, especially with time, that compounding one. Sometimes it does take doing things a lot until you get the gold, you know what I mean? And it isn't always obvious on the outside, but so true. And it's such an interesting one. We do have this life to live, and it is your life to live. You get to choose what choices you make as much as you can. And when you don't think you can, you always can pause, stop, reset, and have those choices. We touched on a bit of, when you've been through your resets before the recall, different countries and the health challenges and the stuff with the family. I'm just curious, and was it really your mum and dad that have been your biggest support when you navigated those, and probably your partner, Simon? Like, is that what helps you get through challenging times?
Definitely. I would say these three are the main points of my support network. And of course, there are the amazing friends I made along the way. One of which actually supported me through a really tough career transition. And that will probably be my third point of transition or pause and reset, in the sense that I started off working in a very traditional, obviously growing up into a Asian immigrant family. The three things that you're allowed to go into as a career choice is either banking, banking or law or medicine. But unfortunately for my dad, I'm very squeamish with blood. So there's only two left, end up going to banking. And I remember, it was very prestigious, obviously first roll out university, straight into an investment bank and, working on these amazing, massive client deals. But I remember one night I was leaving the office and I just remember seeing my boss at the time, who's the MD, on the whole entire floor, still kind of hunched over his desk, working on something really late into the evening, probably about 12 o'clock, midnight at the point. And he just looked so miserable and just unhappy in that moment. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't actually feel very aligned with the work I'm doing, because obviously my passion doesn't feel like it's here. But at the same time, if that's going to be me in 10 or 20 years' time, do I still want to be here? And I thought to myself at that moment, probably not. And in that case, to start thinking about what other things am I interested in. And actually a really great support network in that sense was one of my friends based in New York, who was actually sharing about his really interesting role in digital marketing at the time in an agency. And I just thought, wow, this area sounds so interesting. I never heard about this before. And I kind of reached out to him, and amazingly, he, obviously gave me a nice intro, but at the same time also introduced me to a friend of his in London who was working in the agency here. And basically I went in to have a coffee with him, and basically the next thing you know, they offered me a role on their team to start from fresh again, really kind of start from the beginning, where I was working with people who are 5 years younger than me, who are actually managing me at that point, to learn everything, the ropes in terms of digital marketing. But I think, having these kind of support networks in our circle is so important, because at the end of the day, one of the things I learned is that it's actually those who are in your weakest links, in terms of people that as acquaintances that you build in the earlier on stages, in let's say in your 20s, when you're coming out of school, when you're starting your career. Those are actually really important to foster, because you never know that into the future, in your 30s and 40s plus, wherever you might be in your life now, that you might be able to go back and draw on those amazing support networks to really help you to navigate everything that life has to throw you, or things that you want to change in your life.
Really interesting. Yeah. And having that network, it's not that you can sort of click your fingers and get like an Uber Eats tomorrow morning or an Amazon Prime delivery. It takes time to build those relationships up, and sometimes they come out of nowhere. And if you haven't got that today, just know it can be built over time. You don't need 1,000 connections, just need one or two that have really got your back. And the more you're out there for others, the more that seems to open up. But it can be seemingly out of nowhere sometimes when that happens, I find.
Definitely. Another point of compound effect in action, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's one of the things I found hardest actually over lockdown. I don't know how you found it. I like physical meetings, right? Once you know somebody, you can not see them for years, but it's really hard to build. I find that trusted, deep intimacy, real relatedness over the internet. You can do it. I've got quite good at doing phone calls and Zoom calls and the rest of it, but there's something about spending quality time in the real world with people that is a quality I find doesn't quite happen yet online and may never do, even with the metaverse coming. Do you have any thoughts on that at all? The physical versus the digital?
I agree with that completely, Simon. I remember for me, obviously being a speaker, one of the things I really thrive on is that energy that you get from that in-person event, from audiences who maybe are reacting to what you're saying in the audience while you're speaking, and then also afterwards coming up to you to say hi, to ask questions and shake your hands and things like that. And I really, really missed that during the pandemic. I remember doing a lot of virtual sessions, keynotes or whatever it might be during the pandemic, and it just didn't feel the same. And obviously across all the different tools that we have in our fingertips, it does make the cost lower in terms of running events, and it does make it easier to organize them. But what we do miss, and I think all of us are social beings at the very core, because we are human at the end of the day, that we're used to this ever since the beginning of time, really, to have in person that connection, right? To make that, I suppose, what do you call it, that deeper relationship. So I don't think this can ever replace it in terms of what we currently have in terms of Zoom meetings and virtual events. At the end of the day, I feel like people will always crave that in-person experience. And I've definitely seen that recently, ever since things start opening up. And I've been going to a lot of in-person events, speaking at in-person events. The kind of connection that you make, the meaningful connections that you have with people at those events has been phenomenal. And it's just not the same level that I had during the pandemic.
Beautiful. We're coming up not to the end, but nearly the end of the beginning of the end. There you go. So I'm just curious, look, people listening in, often they have a lot of information coming at them. What's the biggest sort of single takeaway you want them left with, or the biggest suggestion for somebody listening in? They're going to go, I heard Laurie and Laurie said that. That's awesome. Tell their friends that. What's sort of the takeaway or biggest suggestion you have for people listening?
The biggest takeaway I would say is to think about not competing with others alongside this life that we're living on, but rather think about how you can compete with yourself that was you from yesterday. I think that's one of the biggest things that's helped me. And think about things in terms of incremental improvements. So I myself, I read this book called Atomic Habits, and I think a lot of you guys probably have heard this as well, is in terms of our incremental improvements and that 1% a day, like every single day, just think about how you can improve that 1% a day. That really adds up to almost 37 times better of the person that you were a year ago. So when I first learned about that concept, I think that really helped me to feel better about the fact that maybe every single day it feels like there's this tiny little bit of improvement I'm doing, or I made that tiny little bit of what do you call it? I made a tiny little bit of a step forward in terms of what I'm working on. But at the end of the day, when I look back into this overall project or things I worked on, or maybe relationships that I've been building, it all really adds up. And it's like what we were saying earlier in the show, is that when you have that consistency in mind, then you're enjoying the process along the way, and you're thinking about how you can actually just be better than the one that you were a day ago. That really allows you to take that on board and be able to be present in the process. So taking joy in the process, then rather than the end result. So I think that's the key thing I want someone to take away from.
Love it, love it, love it. Be present in the process. And I'm sure you've got some people that you might think would be good guests. Let us know that. If you have any names, you can let us know. And I know people listening in, Laurie, are going to go, how do I get to know more about what Laurie's doing? I know you've got a YouTube channel and a website, I think lauriewang.com, www.lauriewang.com. I'll have that in the portal. And is the YouTube channel the best place for them to learn more about what you're up to?
Yeah, so YouTube and also on LinkedIn, they can follow me there as well, where I definitely share a lot of my upcoming events that they might be interested in, and also anything else in terms of content that might be useful for people as well. So YouTube would be great for the long form content that you're looking for, maybe tutorials on different social media platforms or digital marketing strategies and things like that.
Nice. Is there anything else you want to share before we wrap up the show for today? Take a moment to pause, stop, reset, and you go back to the family and back to your incremental growth.
I think the one last thing I want to share is that one thing I realized is with regards to things, for example, taking that mindfulness on board for myself, is that recently I've been embracing a lot more the micro mindfulness. And what I mean by that is that it doesn't involve things like, for example, taking this massive long 1 hour meditation, but just simple things like when you're traveling around to go to your meetings, or maybe you're home doing some dishwashing or cleaning up. Those are the moments where you can really use to kind of internalize it within yourselves and use that moment of calm to help you kind of reset for your day as well. So that helped me to use little micro moments throughout my day to make me a little bit more present in terms of what we're doing. And if I do feel a bit frazzled, that helped me to kind of recenter myself too, to make sure I am living my best day, really, to be there for my loved ones, like my kids, and also for my husband, for my friends and family.
I love it. And you may know this, Laurie, but just in case the listeners don't, one of the things, the simplest one is when you notice yourself breathing in, you go, I'm breathing in to yourself. Don't say it out loud. And when you're breathing out, you say, I'm breathing out. That simple act of mindfulness about the breath is massively transformational. It doesn't require doing it 20 hours a day in an ashram somewhere. You can just go, oh yeah, I'm breathing in. And linked to that, if ever you're driving in a car and you see a car's brake lights, the red brake lights, that can actually be an anchor to go, oh yes, and back in the body, back present again. So you can create these micro meditation, mindfulness moments that kick you back in, whether it's a light switch in your house, looking at your phone, but you can create these anchors to get yourself back into that if you find that useful. And I think that's such a vital thing. It's not about being calm out on the calm course. It's having that calm on the trading floor, having the calm with the family, having that mindfulness in life day to day, as opposed to sort of theoretical mindfulness when you're in your yoga pants at the yoga studio, which I think a lot of people do. They're very good at sort of doing calm in a calm space. And then you put them in a stressful space, not calm at all.
I love that.
So look, Laurie, I've really enjoyed the show. We could keep talking for hours and hope you get a chance to talk to you again about some more of the work you're doing and your new book when it comes out. I really appreciated you being on the show and being so honest and real with us. And personally, what I found most valuable was this reminder about the compounding effect of consistency, the joy of being present in the process, and the gratitude for the current life in the life that we've built. And so with that said, it's nearly time for us again to pause, stop, reset. Before we do, make sure you go to Apple Podcasts, subscribe, give us 5 stars, make a comment on what you've heard from Laurie today, you take some action on, and you can find some more resources in the portal at pausestopreset.com. Laurie, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Once again, I'm Simon Hedley. Thank you for listening to this episode of Pause, Stop, Reset, which is brought to you by the team at simonx.com and published by thesimpleidea.com. So you get maximum value, and to access all the bonuses and gifts, make sure to head to pausestopreset.com, register and explore the portal. And if you're looking for great people, check out onesmartnetwork.com. If you've enjoyed the show, do give us a positive review, subscribe, and share this episode with friends. I can't wait to share our next episode with you. Till then, remember you can always choose to pause, stop, reset.